Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my live webcast. I'm here to talk to you guys about something that is on all of our minds, whether we have kids or not. It's the idea of online learning, right? Distance learning, virtual learning, however you want to phrase it. It's something that I have been talking with some friends of mine, some colleagues of mine, particularly because of my background on the production side. And what I see is an incredible opportunity for teachers to really embrace the production side of education. There are so many simple but very effective tools that teachers can employ to enrich their educational presentations. Listen, kids are oriented to screens. So are adults. We're always looking at screens wherever we go. And if a teacher doesn't bring that production value to their classroom, there's going to be a significant drop off in terms of attention, retention, and the interest level for students. If you're a black and white TV in a digital world, you're just not going to be able to measure up. Over the course of a school year, we're talking about potential for really losing an entire generation of kids. So I have invited a couple of guests in to talk about this. And my first guest that I'm going to bring on, Tony Hippolyte. Now, let me just tell you, Tony, to me, is like a Swiss Army knife. He does it all on the tech side, whether it's website building, technical issues, event planning, sponsor engagement, and procurement. Tony really does it all. And he and I have had this like sort of long running conversation talking about sort of the issues of the day, but this came up and he's really the genesis of why we're doing this live stream today, because there was an article that came out. I had been talking to him about online teaching. This article came out and he brought it to my attention. He said, we should do a live stream. We should do a live stream on this. And so we started that conversation and he's been incredible. My second guest is Scott Mckenzie. Scott Mckenzie is the CEO and founder of Gaslight Communications. And I remember sitting with Scott a few years back, and we had more than one drink that day. And he talked to me about his idea of starting a communications company. And about 3 months later, he made it happen. And he has not looked back since. And Scott approaches this conversation from the aspect of working with educators. He's had a lot of great conversations with educators. So between Tony on the technical side and Scott on the teacher side, I think we can have a really great conversation. So guys, I want to thank you for joining me today. And I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, Tony, I'm going to start with you. I want to ask you a question because really you were the one who kind of got everything going, right? You were the one who kind of said, hey, we got to talk about this, right? Let's go and talk to the people about this, right? There was an incident that happened this weekend that was a little bit disturbing, especially if you're a parent and particularly if you're a kid. But talk to me a little bit about that incident and talk to me about what your impressions were when you heard what the teacher was doing.
Yeah, so I want to say it was in Taunton Public Schools. Unfortunately, a teacher had a student that exposed himself during a Zoom class, Zoom call, and the teacher was unable to get the student offline for about 7 minutes. So she, and it's no fault of her own, Let me be clear about that. She was unable to get him off. It took her about 7 minutes to get that kid out. And we'll talk about it more later on in the conversation. But, it should be no different if a kid is being disruptive in class. We need to help teachers and provide them the tools to be able to just bump somebody off or know how to do it accordingly. So if a kid is disruptive in class, you tell little Johnny, hey, get out of here, go to the principal's office. What's our digital version of doing that? So it was a little bit frustrating because, given the pandemic and given the challenges within the pandemic, we weren't able to really build around the resource that we have for our teachers. We want to open up the schools, or we want to do virtual learning and all these type of things, but are we training these teachers and training our educators on how to properly, educate our kids? So it was sad, disappointing, and frustrating to see that. And honestly, even a 30-minute training or a 20-minute training with that teacher would have saved a lot of distress in that call.
Right. And so that's one of the things that we're talking about here today is teachers, right? But this is not unique to Taunton. We don't want to call Taunton out, right? We know that these things are happening all over the country, right? Yep. They're everywhere, right? You look, all around the country, and you're seeing every place you go, these Zoom bombers and kids, exposing themselves and this sort of thing. It doesn't matter where you are. So for me, it feels like there is, this gap, right? And Scott, I want to ask you, when you talk to educators, and you've been talking to educators all around the country, I know, what are they telling you in terms of how they are preparing, not the kids, but teachers?
Well, first, I'd like to say I'm glad you invited me to talk about this today, because it's something I've been immersed in the past few months, and I think it's a really important thing to talk about. So we work with a lot of educational institutions, and I personally have a lot of friends who are teachers. And harking back all the way to the beginning of the summer, a friend of mine who's a high school teacher, teaches high school history, said he was so thankful for the summer break, more so than normal. And was in a way dreading going back to school, not because he dreaded school, but because he felt that all the conversation, all the language that was being talked about by kind of school administrations, state governments, everything was all student focused, and understandably so. I mean, the students are the highest priority, but everything was about what kind of resources are we providing the students in order to effectively remote learn. And you can see it right now. There's so much pressure, even here in Massachusetts. Even the past couple of days, you've seen, Governor Romney has been putting pressure on, I think it's on 16 or 17 different communities to move back to in person. I think because there's this false assumption that it's not possible to do remote teaching well. But in talking to all the teachers over the past few months, and I can get into a little bit later as to why we've been having all these conversations. They had two primary fears, and one is that they weren't being adequately prepared for the possibility of remote teaching. I mean, they weren't even calling it remote teaching. If you'll see, everything's called remote learning. You never hear the term remote teaching.
That's a good point.
And the other was really about student engagement, and that was probably, if you tell the one thing that was most teachers were afraid of. Like they're like, it's hard enough to get a student engaged in an actual classroom setting. And they were saying, they were mortified about the prospect of trying to really engage students on a Zoom call, just a talking head, where they're there for hours and hours. So we really kind of got the sense that teachers don't feel that they've necessarily been adequately prepared. And they don't really know how to engage students with the tools that they've been given right now. So that's primarily what we've been hearing.
Mm-hmm. And I know that it's frustrating on all levels, right? One of our viewers on Facebook, she comments that, it stinks because there's no expert right now. This is all new to everyone. Kids aren't responsible enough for this type of learning, right? So yeah, we're asking kids to kind of be the trailblazers, right? To almost lead us. And you're absolutely right, Scott. There has been zero talk about what we do to empower teachers, right? I saw an article that was in the Globe the other day, that's a couple of days ago, and it kind of went through the day in a life of all aspects of a day in the Boston public schools. And I read the article, and it was funny because they mentioned Chromebooks about 27 times, and there was only a cursory mention of teachers, almost like an afterthought, right? Like, for as long as we can remember, teachers have kind of been that pillar, right? They're our safety net, right? I've never known a teacher who hasn't spent their own resources to make their class better, to make students experience better, to go the extra mile for students. So we know that teachers are a willing audience to kind of, receive the type of training that they need to really captivate kids. And for me, my idea is that, teachers need to begin to really condense what it is they want to accomplish, right? Because every school has goals for each student, for each class, for each grade. And those goals are, teacher oriented, teacher level, grade and class level, school level, district level, and even, there's some state standards that have to be met. And so the idea that we're giving them nothing and asking them to perform at the same level, to me, seems incredible. I mean, I don't know what there is that we can do in terms of how to articulate this, but I know teachers, their sort of natural default is, we're just going to do what we have to do. That's what we've always done, and that's what we're going to do here.
Well, the thing that's unfortunate about it, Eric, is that if we were to open a new school, whether it's a public school or a private school, there would be standards that have to be met. There would be a building inspector, there'd be a health inspector, there'd be resource managers that are making sure that each class has a certain amount of computers or books or things of that nature, depending on the school system. Why is, remote teaching or remote learning any different? Why are we providing our teachers the resources to say, hey, if you're a math teacher, here's the baseline, here are the resources, here are the items that you need to make sure that you have a functional system to deliver your education. Because as we know, there are teachers who are going to their school classroom to teach, and then there are teachers who are teaching from their home, and obviously those are two different, worlds that are available to them. They might have faster internet at home. They might have faster internet in the classroom. Maybe it's a little bit more distracting. Maybe all their tools are in the classroom, but they don't feel comfortable going to the school because there are other people there. So we understand the angst and the wanting for people to get back into schools and splitting up between remote learning and bringing kids back into school. But if you don't create a standard about what this actually is, all you're doing is winging it every day,
Right. No, you're 100% right. Scott, what are they saying on the district level or even on the state level? Because I know you've had those conversations. What are they saying about what they have available and they're offering to teachers?
Well, just like kind of everything has been since the beginning of this pandemic, it's you ask someone, you get a different answer, right? Everything is being done differently everywhere. I think things would be, in a lot of ways, a lot better if there was a national standard and national, guidelines that people could follow, but everyone's just kind of doing the best with what they've got, unfortunately. But one consistent thing that I'm hearing, well, two consistent things in that regards. One is that a lot of teachers, even if they're remote teaching, are doing so from the classroom. So even if they aren't going to have kids in the class, they're going to be doing their Zoom call from inside their classroom. Very few teachers that I'm talking to have been doing it, are planning on doing it, or doing it from their home, although some are. But the large majority, if they're doing remote, are doing it from school. And the one of the biggest concerns that I'm hearing is that everyone's trying to do it in a hybrid way. So, okay, there are 600 kids in the school. we're going to break it up. 300 kids are going to be in on Monday, Wednesday. 300 kids are going to be in on Tuesday, Thursday, and everyone's remote Friday. And the teachers and even the superintendents and the principals were talking to, saying that it's really difficult because you're trying to basically teach two schools simultaneously. Say, okay, we're going to teach this class, this material on Monday, then give them work to do on their own on Tuesday, and then teach them again Wednesday, and again, give that to those kids on Tuesday so that by Friday, everyone's on the same page. And so you're asking teachers, it's hard enough to teach. They're going to juggle all of these things. They adapt their lessons plans to this hybrid scenario. And a lot of them saying, we're terrified to go back in person full time because it's just, not to be pessimistic, but we are in the middle of a pandemic. And I think it's overly optimistic to think that we're going to be in school all year long, particularly when the director of the CDC says we're in for this winter the worst health crisis the country's ever seen, and could dwarf what we experienced in the spring in the Northeast and what other areas of the country have been experiencing a rolling fashion throughout the year. But I think that, a lot of them said, if we could feel that we could do remote more effectively, and if we were given the tools to do that, they'd prefer to do it all remote, because then they could keep it all consistent, right? And teach everyone simultaneously over the course of the week and keep everybody engaged. And so it was because of that feedback that we really started to think about, what are the challenges that the teachers are experiencing? It really comes down to engagement and giving an authentic experience and an in-classroom experience. And it's really because they've been given none of the tools to do that. Everything has been about, let's do everything we can to put in plexiglass dividers and put these protocols in the school buses and give PPE to the schools, even though they don't have the amount of PPE that they even really need because there's a shortage of that. So there's these unrealistic expectations of, all right, we're going to dump everything into in-person to make this happen. And there's no contingency plan for if by October 15th, the numbers start to rise, which most people think that they will in most scenarios. All right, what do we do now when it's all remote? And it's kind of like everyone there, there really even isn't a backup plan. I guess we're just all going to teach on Zoom. So we came up with some ideas.
I know you have some great solutions, and we're going to talk about those a little bit. But just before we get to that, Tony, I wanted to ask you just one again, because you had this really interesting take about distance learning and in-person learning that you were sharing with us, and I just want you to kind of share that with the people that are tuned in here, your perspective on that.
Yeah. So I think I said in that last conversation, it was that physical learning can also be digital learning, right? So what I mean by that, and this is just theoretical, but in some sense, it's very real, because right now you see all the technology pushes for AR and VR and all those type of things. But what's happening is that there's a desire. There's still always going to be a desire for some level of connection for people, right? Even though we're talking online, in a weird way, people still want to be touched. They still want to feel like they're very in the moment and they're there. So how do you do that? How do you understand those realities? You have to make the medium as easy as possible. The second you create all these challenges and all these barriers, it no longer feels like you're teaching. They're like, all right, I got to turn on my laptop, turn on my camera. Where do I get my thing? Is little Johnny online? Is little Susie online? Stop. You start creating these hurdles. You no longer think about teaching. You're just thinking about, how do I operate this system? And it's the same thing like when you talk about in-school learning. Like when I went to school, one of the big deals that we had was, everybody had a smart board, and not every teacher got it. But I remember how frustrating it was if we had a teacher that didn't know how to use the smart board. You would just go like, all right, this is ridiculous. Like, can you just use the regular whiteboard? And
yeah,
it became, you no longer cared about what he or she was teaching you. You were just annoyed that he or she didn't know how to use it. And it's the same thing when you talk about digital learning. If your teacher even appears to be, not confident in what they're doing, the kids are not going to be confident in their learning. So what are we doing to help these people out? For example, if you have a teacher, we go back to the physical building. You have your fire drills. Unfortunately, you have your school shooting drills. You have your health drills. You know exactly what you're supposed to do. God forbid something happens in that school. So what do you do when something happens at home? if you see something in the camera where, maybe there's unfortunate child abuse, or maybe there's a medical emergency, how is the teacher supposed to respond? What is the teacher's responsibility? Have you decided these things? Because unfortunately, all those incidents that you showed on the slides, Eric, if you want to show them again, unfortunately, in the world that we live in, these are going to open up for some lawsuits. Whether it's a Zoom failure, or a kid, the kids can't learn, or if a kid, decides to expose his or herself and start Zoom bombing, these are going to open up for a lot of lawsuits and, unfortunately, more importantly, even trauma. No kid should be seeing some weirdo exposing himself online. That's not right. That wouldn't happen in a building. Why should it happen online? But Scott, Phil, you're more than welcome to chime in on that. But that's kind of how I feel about that.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think that the unfortunate thing is, it would be very nice to think that they're giving these protocols and these kind of advice and tips and direction to the teachers. But from what I've gathered, they've barely scratched the surface of what the teachers have been provided. And I think it's backwards, and understandably so. Like I said earlier, you can understand why everything is student focused, right? That's kind of what we're taught to and kind of conditioned to think about. Like, the priority is always the students. So make sure the students have their Chromebooks. Make sure the students have all the things they need for remote learning. Make sure the kids are in person, because that's the best experience for them. But I think we need to rethink the way we're approaching this, because like we have to with everything. Because at the end of the day, a quality online experience, an online learning experience, comes directly from a quality online teaching experience, and giving the teachers all the tools that they need to be able. I made this analogy the other day with you, Eric, and it's kind of like thinking about going to a restaurant, and the person goes in to eat, and they have the best. All you're focusing on is the diner and the dining experience, and you give them the best silverware and the best plates, the most beautiful setting, and the best crystalware. Everything is beautiful and the setting's great. But then, you go back in the kitchen and you've given the chef poor tools to cook with and really bad ingredients. It doesn't matter how fancy the front of the restaurant is. If the back of the restaurant doesn't have the tools, that meal's going to be terrible. Then that's kind of the way they're approaching the online learning right now. It's like, well, all right, let's make sure the kids have all the tools to eat and learn with, but let's not give the teachers any tools to be able to provide this in a quality way. And so I think that we really need to start thinking about quality distance learning starts with quality distance teaching, and quality distance teaching starts with teachers being provided the support and the training they need in order to do that. And it doesn't seem that that's really been happening to date.
Well, sort of in a coincidental way, I know that, and full disclosure, we've worked together on some of these issues, as is the case with Tony and I on some of the technical side of it. But you have you've initiated a program that's teacher centric, and really is sort of the first steps towards giving teachers tools, strategies, support in enhancing their teaching prowess. They're already great teachers, but bringing that into this box that we're all living in. So tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so the genesis of this was conversations that I started having at the very beginning of the summer. And it was around teachers telling me that they were really concerned about engaging their students. And so I started saying, they were saying, like, it's really difficult to engage them, particularly in this box, just a face in a box. And I started thinking about my 6-year-old nephew, who he was in front of his tablet and he loves his educational programming, and you can't pull him away from that stuff, right? Like he's glued to that TV when he's watching his educational programs. And so I started thinking about, like, what if we were able, and I'm going to date myself terribly now, but I was thinking about educational programming and myself as a kid. And I was like, I loved Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I thought to myself, if Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was a half an hour of this, just a face talking, would it have engaged me as much? And the answer, probably not. You saw him come in, he takes off his shoes and puts on his sneakers and takes off the sweater and goes into the kitchen and then goes to the land of make-believe and does all this stuff. And it's very interactive, and he's showing you all these props and all these things, and you loved it. And I started thinking to myself, what if you were able And then imagine, take that one step further, and imagine if Mr. Rogers' neighborhood could have been interactive. So you could have actually talked to Mr. Rogers while he was doing these things, and he could talk directly back to you. I said, now what if you were to do this in a classroom? And not just for kids, but everything up from the kindergarten all the way through college. But really make a class more of like an interactive educational program where it's a lot more engaging, a lot more dynamic. And we, as a communications agency, we have our media training and presentation capabilities, and we have our kind of production capabilities for both remote and in person. And we said, what if we merge these into a training program where we can virtually show teachers in a single session and their aides and assistants how to transform their classroom into their own production studio. Multiple cameras located around a green screen, maybe the TA or the who's out of a job now because there's no role for them in a remote learning capacity. They are now the producer doing camera change and camera angles, and teach them how in one single session in a day how they can do that and transform their classroom into a lot more dynamic, engaging environment for kids. So we put together this program. We talked with experts and superintendents over the summer of what they needed, and we've implemented it, and it's called Classroom Live. And it really makes every teacher the star of their own TV show. And we're getting great feedback from it. People are really excited about it. And at the end of the day, it really is about providing teachers with, and the beautiful thing is this isn't expensive. Most of the teachers have all the tools they need to do it at their fingertips. They just don't know how to utilize those tools or how to work them. So very quickly, we make them experts in kind of production and broadcast, and every single 52-minute class becomes its own wholly interactive educational program that really engages students at all levels. And we're excited about it. We think it's worthwhile. Is it the end all be all? No, but I think it's a good first step to start providing these teachers some sort of support. And then to what Tony says, if you have something like that, then maybe you can start thinking about it in a larger way. Like, okay, let's put together full levels of programming like you would training teachers in a physical school. Like you were talking about, Tony, what happens if you see something? You go through training inspections and health inspections and all these different things, really putting together protocols that you can be remote, but it can be a true school. And like that headline in the Globe article you showed, Eric, like, if this was real school, I'd be interested, but since it's not, I'm not. And it's like, if you could turn around and make virtual learning and remote learning feel like real learning, I think you'll have a much better outcome. And keep everybody safe, because let's just be honest and real about things. I think it's a fantasy to think that in the middle of January, everybody's going to be in school based on, the actual numbers scientists say. I know that a lot of people don't want to talk about that these days because there's so much distraction, there's so much pollution and noise that we're getting and distraction. But I mean, that is the true reality of things. I think anything other than that is a pipe dream.
Well, I'm going to tell you that's one of the things that is the biggest challenge for me, is that I'm a natural optimist, right? But every trend is saying that we're going in the wrong direction. And I think that, part of even my idea of bringing both of you on is, was thinking, teachers need to be supported on a couple of levels, right? That technical level, right? Really becoming proficient, really becoming very comfortable with the tools that they're using to present, whether it's Zoom or Teams or Google Meet or WebEx or Slack or whatever it is, really having that sort of technical proficiency where they can feel very comfortable, so that if something happens in their class that's unexpected, they can at the very least shield the rest of the class from something that's inappropriate, or be able to troubleshoot when maybe a kid gets on but they can't see or they can't hear, those sort of things. And really, that's one sort of level. And then that other level is the production, right? Again, coming from that production background, I see a great opportunity to really, begin to condense sort of your goals, I think, condense what it is you're trying to accomplish, and really get it down to a place where you can take those into and convert them into palatable, smaller bites that become productions. And so when you are alleviated of the technical burden, when you were feeling really comfortable in your environment, in your ability to manipulate your environment, then by extension, the production side benefits, because now, yes, you can introduce another camera, another device, right? Who's to say that you can't take your smartphone or your tablet or another laptop that has a camera and join your own Zoom meeting and make you the co-host, so that you can be here and then walk over to the other side of the classroom or walk to another location in your home and do another part of the presentation or transition to a new presentation, just to change the dynamic in the class. So that's why I thought you guys were the perfect pair to bring on to talk about the production and the technical.
Well, Eric, the one thing that both of you and Scott highlighted about the dynamics of the presentation, unfortunately, one group of children that gets forgotten about is kids that are in special needs. Whether they're autistic or they have ADHD or any type of learning, disability. I don't want to call it disability, but they have inhibitions in terms of their learning, and these kids are completely forgotten about because you're leaving a lot in the hands of the parents to set up the computer, get the kids online, and then hopefully the kid just figures out the rest. And fortunately, a lot of children now are technologically proficient. But if there's someone who that is of special needs, that can create a lot of hurdles to, one, capture their attention, actually deliver a proficient learning experience, and get them up to speed and keep them on track. And that can be really, really challenging for those type of kids. Whether it's on an elementary level, middle school level, and even as far as a college level. How do you accommodate for those kids and those families to help them make sure that they're still getting the same level and quality of learning, as they would if they were in school?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's a great point, Tony. And you're right. I mean, I think that, whether your kid is special needs or preschool or middle school or elementary or high school or even college, right? The idea of being able to meet kids where they are, right? And engage them without being in the room, right? And, I think as all of us are entrepreneurs, we know that a lot of our secret sauce is being able to be in the room and command the moment, right? I don't want to get too much of my own branding in, but to really be in the room and command the moment. And when that room is taken away, how do we now bridge the gap, right? With dynamic presentation and also technical proficiency. I really see it as this two-tiered approach that we're just saying to teachers, okay, you know what? Get it done. Figure it out. Do what you can, and as long as you're trying or you're on the screen somewhere, we're going to take that as an acceptable standard. But I think that between sort of your approach, Tony, and your approach, Scott, we really have this great opportunity to up the ante, really change the eye line in terms of what's possible and what's doable. And really then, taking the online teaching, the online teacher to this next level of acceptance in terms of here's what's possible. So now here's the standard, right? Right now, there is no standard, or the standard goes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So that's why I thought it was so important to have both of you guys on here today.
Yeah. So Eric, one more thing about standards too is that,
yes.
19 is not the last of what we will see of something of that nature. We would like to call it like a once in a lifetime event, but schools get affected in different ways. Maybe there's an outbreak of chicken pox, maybe there's a flood, maybe there's God forbid a tornado that strikes a town and it destroys. I think it happened last summer. A school was destroyed from a tornado, so the kids had nowhere to go. So if the schools already have a system in place, we're like, all right, cool, school destroyed, but we can still educate our children from home. They activate, they break the glass and they activate the emergency button, and now the teachers can activate those tools. This should be available regardless of a pandemic or not. This should be already in place, done and set up and ready to go. Because there are going to be times, the kids are going to hate it, but if there's a snowstorm, guess what? They can still, educate. You don't lose
You're right. But Tony, while I have you there, no, those are incredible points. While I have you there, let me just ask you, if you were talking to a teacher today and they were saying, well, look, I'm in my house and I'm trying to figure things out, what's the first thing you'd say to a teacher in terms of getting their own space, whether it's a classroom or their home, getting their own space buttoned up and getting it working at peak performance technically?
I would say, one, don't be intimidated and audit what you have. Don't go on Amazon and start buying all types of equipment and spending money. I would audit what you have and see what's available to you and work with that. And then if you want to improve and level up your production, as Scott would call it, then you're more than welcome to. But what most people have in their home is more than adequate for what they're doing. It just needs to be fine-tuned. It's no different than me, having a samurai sword. I can do some damage with it, but if I give it to an actual samurai, he'll cut down a whole army, But it's the same thing. So with a teacher, audit what you have, definitely increase your internet speed if you can afford it, and then practice with other teachers. Practice. You all have the same challenge. Bounce ideas off each other. Like, all right, how do I do this volcano experiment? How do I talk about dinosaurs? How do I do this math thing? What did you do? Oh, I used my iPhone. Or what did you do? I used my, my table in my dining room, and I used the white sheet. Whatever those things may be. But I think most people, believe it or not, have all the tools they need. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to the teacher. The teacher, I know I've had teachers that had massive impacts on my life, and they had less resources compared to other teachers. They weren't, all, smokes and mirrors. They were great in delivering the message. But obviously, when it comes to technology, I think we need to get everybody to that same level, as you said, a standard of proficiency where they can deliver the message and say, hey, this is how you do it. But I think that comes with practice, where if you practice with your co-teachers where they're doing math, geography, history, and you have your own little network, you're going to be better, because now when you go Monday morning and teach your kids, you already have a couple miles under you where you're like, all right, I feel good. I feel comfortable being on camera and talking to these kids. Because I know that was one of the biggest challenges about just the whole Zoom blow up in period. No one was used to being on camera as much as we've been on camera, in the last 6 months.
No, those are great. And Scott, I'm going to ask you the same thing. For a teacher wanting to really sort of up their presentation, what's one of the first things you tell them?
Well, I would say, I think it's basically what Tony's saying here is that, explore the full capabilities of the tools at your disposal, right? I don't think most of them have. And like I said, as we're talking about Classroom Live and turning every class into its own kind of mini production studio, they don't need to go out and buy a whole bunch of things to do this. I mean, teachers are amazing, because every teacher I talk to, they're going out at the beginning of the school year and buying their own supplies for their classroom anyway, because the school isn't doing it for them. So they're accustomed to doing this. Really, you can turn around and get a green screen for $75. And now suddenly you have a fully dynamic background, then you can really increase that. So if you have a camera in your classroom on the green screen, you in front of your a laptop and a couple screens where you see the kids, and then you have your tablet in another area of the classroom, which is focusing at the map or whatever that you use. Now that teacher can kind of roam the classroom in a more natural way, flip through those cameras, go back to their home base where they have the green screen, and just make a dynamic kind of environment for the kids to enjoy. But like I said, you don't need to spend a lot of money to do it. I mean, really the only thing that most people don't have, which I recommend getting, is that green screen, because that really opens up a world of possibilities for presenting, and really, as you said, and I'm going to take your words and not claim them as my own, Eric, but you said, when teachers are presenting with these platforms, it's either them in the space or the content that they're showing in the space. So they might bring up like a math problem, but now the teacher's out of that thing. What if you were able to be in the same space as the content you're providing? So you're able to pull up a PowerPoint presentation you're going through, you're scrolling through it maybe on Prezi Video, you're pointing at different things, and then you have to work that math problem out. Well, let me walk over to the Blackboard, turn on the Blackboard camera, switch to that one, and now I can work through that and show the work being done there, and then walk back to so it really creates a little bit more of a dynamic environment and a lot more fluid. And to Tony's point, practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the better, the more fluid and better you become at it. And, it only takes, some practice to become proficient. And if you become proficient in it, I think it will serve you much, much better over the course of the school year. And really, who knows how long this is going to go on? We're hearing, oh, there'll be a vaccine in January. And then something's like, oh, we'll have everyone, if there's 2 vaccines required, everyone won't be vaccinated until 2023. I mean, I've heard all sorts of things happening. So I think we just need to prepare for ourselves. And again, like Tony mentioned, this isn't I heard this again, this isn't the first pandemic. That's not going to be the last. They're occurring with increasing, more increasingly. There's other things that can occur that can bring people out. In Massachusetts, last year, a couple of years ago, there was a school that had asbestos. They had to shut the whole school down. It was down for the year because they had to clear it out. And they didn't know where those kids were going to go. So this is just something to train yourself in. That's an affordable, understandable way to do this that can serve teachers and students for a long, long time, not just during the pandemic, but most definitely during the pandemic will be extremely valuable.
Well, no, those are all great. I mean, both you guys have made some incredible points here. And what I would say to teachers on both the technical side and on the production side is, just really reiterating what both of you guys have said is, practice, practice. Take inventory of what it is you have. Don't run out and get a whole bunch of things, but I personally, I think that there are some things that are really game changers in terms of your ability to present, right? You guys obviously see that I have a green screen behind me, but a green screen can become like your blackboard because you can put anything you want on there. You can put a math problem on there. You can do a tour of a city or of a country. You can do anything you want on a green screen, so it becomes like your virtual blackboard or whiteboard. So I would say, and honestly, I would like to see a day when everyone has it, both kids and teachers, so that there never has to be, one of the reasons that some of the public schools switched to uniforms a while ago, you'll see even public schools will have uniforms, is because there were, conflicts about what kids were wearing or not wearing, right? And you know how kids can be. So they said, okay, well, we're just going to eliminate it. Everyone wear the same thing, right? I'd love to see it where you had, sort of everybody presented, or had at least the ability to say, well, okay, let me, I'm trying to describe something to you. Let me put it to my green screen and show you, right? And having that marriage of, Tony, you put it so well, right? That, distance learning is physical learning, right? So even the idea of sending out kits so that, if I have this bottle and I'm using it in an experiment, that same bottle has been sent to the kid and they're doing their experiment with the same thing. And that feels like that makes a connection right away with, that kind of bridges the gap that is the natural distance when you're just looking at someone on a screen. But, comprising, semester kits that send, this is going to be part of what we're going to do. And when you can look on the screen and say, oh, that teacher has exactly what I have. They're working with exactly what I have. And now, oh, I have the background. And now I can do a presentation to the class using my Blackboard or my digital green screen. Now we're starting to bridge some gaps. Now we're allowing the creativity that we know that the kids have, we know that the teachers have. We're giving it a canvas where people can start to work. So again, that technical and that production marriage, I think, is really sort of a big part of the answer of how we go forward and really sort of begin to own this space instead of just trying to exist in it. And I want to tell you, we have about a minute left before we chime out. I want to give each of you an opportunity, let people know who you are, where you are, what you do, how they can reach you, all those things. I want you guys to really, I want to just give you an opportunity to really, toot your own horns, because you guys have been incredible in here for me. So, Tony, I'll start with you. Tell people who you are, where you are, how they can support you.
So Tony Hippolyte, hospitality specialist and marketer. So currently working with Transmit Marketing with Jeremy Mays. We're doing some amazing projects for some hospitality and blanking out digital brands all across the country. So we focus on Facebook ads, Google AdWords, all the special marketing, branding, things of that nature. And I also work in the hospitality industry where we consult for small, medium-sized restaurants and organizations to kind of optimize their operation. Just always kind of been a serial entrepreneur, have had many failures, but a few good successes. And I've always just loved the digital space. I always loved technology, and I always try to find ways to kind of bring it all in. If anybody wants to get a hold of me, you're more than welcome to email me at tony@transmit.com. Transmit is spelled, as you can see below, TRANSMYT. So tony@transmit.com.
And my apologies, I should have had a banner for you made up, and I'll do that next time. Scott, tell the people all about yourself.
Sure. So I'm the president of Gaslight Marketing Communications, and we're a full-service, fully integrated marketing communications agency with offices in Boston, New York, and DC. Or at least I think we still have them. I haven't been in them in 6 months, so hopefully they still are there. We do everything from full PR campaigns, branding, creative services. Really, at the end of the day, working with B2B and B2C companies and organizations, helping grow their brand, increase their brand visibility, overcome challenges, meet their business goals. And you can learn all about us at gaslightcom2ms.com and for Gaslight Communications. You can learn about us more there, about the great team that we have, and you can learn more about Classroom Live in the services section there. And anyone is interested in learning more, feel free to connect with us. That's the long and short of it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I so appreciate you.
Eric, how about yourself? You got to plug yourself.
Well, I want to say that I'm thankful to have friends like you guys, and I'm even more thankful that you guys don't charge hourly rates, because I lean on you guys for so much of what I do, and so I appreciate our friendship. Even though we've all done business together too, I really lean on you guys for support, for your knowledge, just sometimes just to be able to bounce ideas. So, I'm Eric Cox of Media Prepared, and we do media training. We also train people for this particular medium in this particular time. So it's a natural transition. You guys can get in touch with me at eric@mediaprepared.com anytime. And I'm hopeful we can reconvene here on Facebook Live at some time in the future as things begin to develop. But I have to say, I appreciate the incredible input that you guys offered to the audience that we had here today. And I want to thank you guys so much for it.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys, that's it. Thank you. Thanks to everyone out there who's watched. I want to say that, if you have a child who's in school, if you are a teacher, if you know a teacher, let's have that conversation. Let's see how we can take your presentation, your curriculum, your goals, and bring them to life in this box, because this is where we all live. If that's something that you think is of interest to you, you guys can certainly get in contact with me anytime, and we will at least have the conversation. So until next time, I want to thank you guys for watching, and have a great afternoon.